My name is Average Joe, and I'm a proud geek with expertise in movies, superheroes, and animation.
My name is Beefporkribs. I'm a fine repository of esoteric knowledge, which I suppose most people would qualify as geeky. Though I dabble in many fandoms, my main areas of expertise are anime, movies, and Belgian comics, with a strong recent insurgency of D&D.
Our mission is to bring nerd and geek culture to the masses
by sticking it all under the microscope.
Welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast.
Movies, comics, graphic novels, TV, cartoons, animation, nerds are geeks, entertainment culture. Hear it on the Bat Jar, Nerdy Power. Nerds and geeks, come gather around the scene. Come and join us in the Bat Jar. Come and tune into Average Joe and his team. Lots of room here in the Bat Jar. When the newest nerdy news drops, these podcast pals put it under the scope. DC, Marvel, Disney, Star Wars, cinematic multiverses, mega Christmas, strangest franchise. Hear it on the Bat Jar, Nerdy Power.
Hello there, and welcome to the Bat Jar Podcast, where we put nerd and geek culture under the microscope.
Get on with it! I don't know. What you said earlier just made me think of Monty Python, so it came out.
Now, Beeper, here's a philosophical question for you.
Ooh, I love those.
The way we intro each episode started out very early on in our show's history. We did an episode about the Arrowverse, and we commented on how every episode of Arrow or Flash or Supergirl started with the main character saying, like, my name is blah, 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 and I'm basically this person. And the point of those little intros was to help the audience kind of like understand what the show was about.
Right.
And we kind of just started copying that because we're like, man, if someone just started randomly listening to one of our episodes, they'd be like, what is this? And I think Asian John was particularly concerned that if people just started listening to the show and heard him talk, they'd be like, who is this guy? Like, what is his deal?
Why is he saying these things? Why does he know nothing?
And so we've just sort of continued that habit up until present day. And then the other point, Stan Lee, the late Stan Lee, always used to say that every single comic book was going to be someone's first comic book. And so it was kind of like a mandate that he had for stories he wrote and stories that he oversaw, that you had to have some way of the main character kind of like addressing who they were or how they got to where they are in every single comic. Nowadays, they have these like introductory pages that kind of like give you a little bit of detail on like who they are and how they got there. So our intro has kind of always served that purpose as well. But I don't know. Do you think it's time we mix it up?
I think that depends on what you mean by mixing it up. I think it might be time for me to review what I said because, well, as you may or may not know, I don't listen to the podcast that often. I have real trouble listening to my own voice and then sometimes my own opinions too. But
you're a fine repository of esoteric knowledge, which I suppose most people would qualify as geeky.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, it's still accurate. I'm just not sure if it's the best way to present myself.
You do mention there's a strong recent insurgency of D&D, which I don't know if that's probably the case anymore.
Oh yeah, that's just straight up one of my main fandom / interests now. It's shifted a little bit, so
because our theme song does, I think, very well articulate like what we do on the show here. And I'm like, is it necessary to have the intro and the theme song?
I mean, I think it's still a good thing to have it so that, once again, people don't wonder who are these, doofuses and why are they saying the thing they're saying and why are they so very unknowledgeable about certain things or very weirdly knowledgeable about some things. I still think that it gives the people an idea of who we are rather than what we are, whereas the theme song is more what we are.
Fair enough. Well, maybe for our 250th episode, we'll re-record what our intros are so that at least I'm trying to think. Mine's probably needs to be updated as well.
But I mean, we all need to get an update every once in a while. And I think also, I don't know, I feel like even just what we do on the podcast, I feel like under my co-hostage has become a lot more ranty and a lot more wordy than it was before with either Pixel Patch or Asian John.
Well, let's try and balance that out. Today, we are discussing a question that you posed to the bat jar, and the bat jar didn't know what to say because it doesn't talk. So we just wrote it into the bat jar. And this is related to the series Avatar: The Last Airbender, which we have not really ever focused on before. So maybe this is as good a time as any to do a secret origin segment.
Ooh.
Beeper, how were you first introduced to Avatar? And of course, we're not talking about the Blue Alien movies. We're talking about the series that aired on Nickelodeon.
Yes, and we're not talking about the movie they made afterwards. I was aware of Avatar as a show in a kind of general way, but at some point, and I have no idea if this was when it originally aired, if it was a rerun, or when it like around the time it originally aired. I'm not sure, but I saw the last 2 episodes, which means I saw part 2 and part 3 of the season finale before I saw anything else. Which was very strange for a number of reasons. And that was kind of the end of that. I didn't really get back to it. I was like, yeah, this looks like a nice show. And I heard a lot of people who liked it. But I didn't really watch Nickelodeon as a kid. I wasn't into that culture. And then when I got to universities and I got into anime, I also figured out, oh yeah, there's also Avatar. And I remember enjoying a couple of episodes, and so I watched it and I was like, oh, this is actually great. I think this was back in the day when you could have like full episodes of Avatar: The Last Airbender on YouTube. Because I think I watched the first season entirely on YouTube. And then, yeah, from then on, I love the show. It's great characters, and I got the entire series on DVD, and I've watched it at least 5 times completely through since.
Wow. I think I'm kind of the opposite. We're the same in the sense that I had a general awareness of the show when it was airing, but I was also not watching Nickelodeon shows from it aired originally between 2005 and 2008, and I just wasn't kind of watching those kind of shows at that time.
I actually might have seen it on its original release then, because it would have been in grade 11 or 12, and that would be 2008 would be my second half of grade 11, first half of grade 12. It matches up.
I heard a lot about its reputation, and I mentioned how I got into the Nostalgia Critic when I was in university, and at one point he did like a whole retrospective on like the series, including like he was able to get one of the voice actors to like be in his video, and I remember watching that, and that kind of gave me spoilers for the whole show, being like, oh, okay, like I know how the story ends, and now I don't have to watch it because I've gotten the condensed version. So I sort of just resigned myself to I don't have to watch this show now. I've seen how it ends. And people all around me, brothers, friends, our mutual friend One Shot, would just like kind of get on my case about how I should watch Avatar: The Last Airbender. I don't know. It was on all of a sudden. I remember it was like 2018 and it was on Netflix. So I watched the first 2 episodes, kind of the opposite of you. You watched the final 2. I watched the first 2. And to me, at that point, it just sort of felt like a shonen anime. I'm like, this feels so much like every shonen anime I've ever seen. And kind of knowing how it ended, I'm like, okay, well, I don't need to watch this. So I kind of just parked it. And then I don't know what possessed me, but like last year during the pandemic, I'm just scrolling through Netflix and I see it's there. And I was like, let's just give it another shot. And so I kind of picked up exactly where I left off because Netflix remembered like what was the last episode I'd watched. And I gradually made my way through, and all of a sudden it kind of made sense. I'm like, I can see why everyone loved this so much. Everything people say about it is true, and it's a quality product. And people will now ask me, well, did you regret waiting that long? I'm like, no, I had other things that occupied my time during the in-between years, and I'm happy I got to enjoy it when I did.
And to be fair, it's not like we had myself and other people had recommended things like Adventure Time that you kind of looked into or like, I'm not sure about that. And like, is not, I know Adventure Time doesn't have the same universal appeal, but I feel like within the circle that you existed in around those years, probably most of the people you knew pretty well wanted you to watch Adventure Time as well. And like, I love Adventure Time, but Avatar: The Last Airbender is infinitely superior show.
So you pose the question, who is the main character of Avatar: The Last Airbender?
Yeah. I mean, I think it was more, I wanted to put it in there because it is something that I've been thinking about a lot, and that kind of hit me when I rewatched it, probably the third or fourth time. And I realized that people like bring a lot of attention to certain things about the show, but not to that. I'd never heard somebody kind of, I'm sure somebody has, like, I didn't scour YouTube to see if somebody had the same opinion as me. But I kind of realized how much I like there is kind of a sharing of that role, and I think it goes in also for like our idea of like what is a protagonist, and it makes it a little bit strange because ultimately, if you like the obvious answer to the protagonist or the main character is, yeah, it's Aang. He's the one who's trying to accomplish a thing, but at the same time, the goal is to bring balance, and that's the other thing, is it depends on how you look at it. If you look at it from the very basic point of view, and I guess I'm going into my rant or my
Well,
where
maybe
it is.
before you
Yeah, okay.
rant,
Yeah.
give for people like there might be people like me who have yet to watch this show, so maybe let's give a little Blu-ray case description for
Oh,
Avatar:
right.
The Last Airbender.
All right. In which I will not share my theory. Should I? Am I allowed to just do the intro to the show?
Sure, if you can remember it.
What? Wait. What? Which one does it start? It started with water, right?
Yes.
Water, earth, fire, air. Long ago, the four nations lived in harmony. Is it immediately? Yeah. And the four nations lived in harmony. Then everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Only the Avatar, master of all four elements, could bring peace and restore balance to the world. But when the world needed him most, he disappeared. 100 years have passed, and my brother and I, this is Katara, a character speaking, found a new avatar called Aang. And although he still has lots to learn, I believe that Aang can save the world. And then swelling of music. Bwah, 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 bwah. But I think it does actually, it's one of the strengths of that show is that you get the idea. There are four nations. They all have elements, and they can control elements. At some point, the Fire Nation started attacking everybody and is slowly taking over the world. There's this guy called the Avatar. He's supposed to bring balance, but he disappeared for 100 years.
He's the one person that can essentially use all four superpowers.
Yeah, pretty cool. But I think it also, like, the intro also kind of hints towards the idea that the Avatar is more than just a guy who can use more than one power. He is like this very important figure that everybody kind of believes in and will bring, unity and peace back. Like, he's meant to be there to maintain balance.
Now, before you go into your rant, Beeper, I think I've discovered a nuance that will actually help inform this conversation, because you pose the question like, well, who is the actual main character of the show? But I watched this one video where this guy posited that the main character, the protagonist, and the hero of the story are not always the same person. And in fact, each one of those can be a different person. And I think because Avatar: The Last Airbender has so many great characters, there can be case to be made that there's different people who fit those different roles.
Okay.
So very briefly, this guy defined the main character as the person who is meant to be the audience's point of view. That they're the ones who are learning about other characters, about the world from their perspective. So, the guy used the example of Scout in To Kill a Mockingbird. Like, we see the story from her point of view for the most part. And in that story, Atticus Finch is the protagonist. In The Great Gatsby, we're seeing everything from Nick's point of view, but
So
obviously Jay
character.
Gatsby is the protagonist.
Right. Okay.
So he defines the protagonist as essentially the one who drives the story forward, that they're the one who has a mission, and they're the one who kind of like essentially brings the main character along on the journey that they're trying to accomplish.
Okay.
he considers the protagonist as a literary archetype, like something that needs to happen in a piece of literature. But then he poses the idea of a hero as a psychological archetype. And he says like the hero of a story is one that learns lessons or learns a big lesson that helps them grow, that overcomes some kind of lie that they're believing about themselves. And in order for the hero to accomplish his role in the story, he has to have an opportunity to revisit his starting point with his new belief in mind and confront the lie with that new belief.
Okay. Yeah, well, by that definition, I think there isn't much of an argument about who the main character and who the hero are.
And who the
Well,
protagonist.
actually, hmm?
I would actually posit that Sokka and
Katara
Katara are the main
character.
characters.
I kind of agree. Although, the thing is, Avatar The Last Airbender has several episodes that are much more third-person omniscient, in the sense that you do follow other people and that are not interacting with any of the main cast sometimes. And you still kind of see them. Like, if you had to pick somebody who fit that definition, yes, Sokka and Katara would be the ones. But at the same time, you could make an argument for Aang being that as well, because he still is the character that is present in the most episodes.
Is he? I don't know if he is. I mean, we'd have to go back and count, but I feel like there's several episodes he's not even in.
Not that many. And I feel like those episodes are episodes where like Sokka and Katara might not be as well, because there are some of those. But yeah, I can understand. And in that case, like the protagonist would be Aang, I guess.
Well, he's the one with the mission, right? Of course, he's the plot doesn't exist without him.
Okay, but the plot also doesn't exist without a few other people who, like, the plot doesn't.
Because you're trying to make the case. I'm stealing your thunder here, but you want to make the case that Zuko is the main character, right?
No.
Oh.
The case I make is that Zuko and Aang are both the main character, and that the story could not happen without either one.
Interesting.
Actually. Yeah, that's actually like, and the reason behind it, like, if we use the one we talked about, then yes, I'd say the protagonist is Aang and the hero is Zuko. Aang is still qualifies as a hero given that definition, because he does still need to face his beliefs, although he kind of gets validated in his beliefs instead of changing them, whereas Zuko changes them. And people talk about this all the time about Avatar The Last Airbender, that Zuko has the greatest character arc ever written. That's like,
yeah, to me,
whether that's true or not, people say that a lot.
To me, Aang has such a flat character arc. He more or less stays the same. And then you're right, the one point at the very end where he has to kind of like, sacrifice his beliefs, kind of Deus Ex Machina shows up and allows him to not sacrifice his beliefs, or like, so that kind of just reinforces.
Yes and no. I think there are certain things, like if you rewatch the last episode, especially in his fight with the Fire Lord, you realize like he was still taking a risk, right? And the Lion Turtle kind of tells him, should we have given a spoiler warning? Because we're going into a lot of spoilers right now, but we'll see. But anyways, if not, I'm about to spoil a whole lot of things because I need to establish what's going on. But in his fight against the Fire Lord, you do see him almost get overpowered, and it makes it a fight of the will rather than a fight of skills, because in the fight of skills, Aang, going into Avatar mode, 100% beats Ozai. There's no question about it. But it's when he tries to stick to his principle is the only time he almost lost that battle, because Ozai has a strong will and almost overtook him while he was doing the weird exorcism thing, right? And I think that does validate a certain change. I'm not saying he's got an amazing story arc, and yes, clearly Zuko has a better one, but it's not like 100% terrible either.
So why? Because okay, let's agree that Aang's character arc is not as compelling.
Yeah,
I would argue it is a flat character arc, meaning that like he believes the truth about himself at the beginning of the story. And the nature of a flat character arc, if you guys don't know what that is, it's a story wherein instead of the main character or the individual reacting to the world and kind of like forming who they are based on that, it's about the world reacting to the truth and nature that this character has. Like Captain America would probably be another good example of a, or people talk about Goku from Dragon Ball being like a flat character arc as well. And
Or honestly, Toph in Avatar, because she never changes what she is. The world just bends to her will, quite literally. And that is continued a little bit when she in her brief appearance in Korra. But yeah.
So then why is Zuko's like role alongside Aang so important as a
here's the thing, like
character?
Like there are several, like anybody who's watched the show knows there are several episodes that draw parallels between Aang and Zuko, right? The Tempest probably being in season 1, the Tempest, or I can't remember the name of the episode, but the episode with the archers and the blue mask. I think it might be the blue mask. And there are several different episodes, and then also in season 3, the episode where Zuko is learning about his ancestors at the same time as Aang is hearing about it, but one is hearing it from the point of view of Ozai and no, not Ozai. No, the
or those original Firebender people.
Yeah, the original Fire Lord, the one who's Comet, Sozin. Yeah. So Zuko is hearing it from Sozin's point of view, and Aang is hearing it from Roku's point of view, but they're hearing the same story. And that episode really draws parallels between the two of them. But then if you rewatch the show thinking about it, those episodes are actually almost everywhere. Like almost any episode that the two of them are in, they start drawing parallels. And even episodes that they're not in, there are still a lot of parallels both in who they are and ultimately what I think is what my main argument is to say that they are both the main character and both equally important is in what the quest is. The quest of the show. Like at the beginning, you watching, it's like, yeah, it's to defeat the Fire Lord. Clearly, that's how it ends, and that's how it goes. But that's not actually true. And going back to the intro, the purpose of the Avatar is to bring balance to the world. And had Zuko not existed, or had Zuko not followed the path that he had, that wouldn't have happened. Defeating Ozai would have left either a Zuko who had not had his character development and still had the same opinion, or Azula who was just as bad, if not worse, than Ozai in charge, and the Fire Nation still would have continued to try to attack. The Fire Nation wasn't defeated in by military might. The Fire Nation still has the strongest army in the world at the end of Avatar: The Last Airbender. They still could control most of the Earth Kingdom, and the balance wouldn't have been struck unless Zuko also came to term with himself, who he is, his heritage, and what his role is in the world. And in a show that's done a really good job to not dumb down, but to present in a way that is intelligible very big concepts about Eastern philosophies, and the idea of balance within the universe is a major theme of it, and it can't happen with just Aang. And I think the show actually does push that agenda quite often in a lot of just the small moments that make up the amazing character growth that Zuko has. It actually amounts to making Zuko not only have more screen time than almost anybody else other than Aang. Like obviously the people who follow Aang get a lot of screen time, but like Zuko still gets quite a lot, like for somebody who was just an antagonist in the first season. Like you see him way more than you in season 1 than you would see Azula in season 2 or Ozai in season 3. Right? There was always something about him that was more than just the antagonist who eventually became their friend, because he doesn't actually have that kind of character arc either. He's not a Vegeta or a Piccolo or, any given fairy tale character who gets defeated by the hero and's like, oh, you're actually a nice guy. Because he always, for one thing, he always knew Aang was a nice guy, right? Like from their first actual meeting in person, one of the first thing Aang says to him is, I wonder if we could have been friends. And it clearly bugs him, even though he immediately attacked him. Later on, he reflects on it, and it is bugging him. He knows that he's chasing this kid who probably has done nothing wrong, but he's still doing it. And it's only when he comes to terms with who he is and his role and, following a lot of the influence of Uncle Iroh, how he can help other people, that he can complete this character arc.
Hello, Zuko here. But I guess you probably already know me, sort of. So, the thing is, I have a lot of firebending experience, and I'm considered to be pretty good at it. Well, you've seen me, when I was attacking you. Yeah, I guess I should apologize for that. But anyway, I'm good now. I mean, I thought I was good before, but now I realize I was bad. But anyway, I think it's time I joined your group and taught the Avatar firebending. Well, what's your answer? Yeah, that's what I'd say too. How am I supposed to convince these people I'm on their side?
So a big core of your kind of theory that Zuko is meant to be held up as a main character with Aang is that in order for the Avatar to accomplish his mission of bringing about balance, is that you need Zuko to be doing everything that he's doing in his story arc.
Yeah, you need the Fire Nation to be...
I would argue, though, that Toph and Katara kind of do, like, they have a similar... It's not as, like you say, there's not as much of a change in their character from Zuko, but they're also there to kind of, try and deal with a lot of the dissension that has built up between the different nations. Like, if you remove any of them from the story, then the Avatar's mission is not complete. Zuko goes through the most radical transformation, and I would say is a lot like a Vegeta, because even with Vegeta, his turn to being a hero, it's a very gradual, storyline, and he does have that point where, like, you think he's a good guy, and then he gets a moment to kind of revisit his evil roots, and he realizes that that's not what he wants anymore. And Zuko has the same thing happen in season 3 or book 3.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but the difference here is that, and I think that's also why, for anybody, go rewatch the show thinking about that, and you'll see it a lot more. I know it's a bit of a big ask, but there is yes, if Sokka and Katara never found Aang, then nothing happens, clearly. And Toph is important to teach him earthbending, but that's... They could have still brought Aang to the point where he was, and it wouldn't have brought balance to the world. And I think that's why it is and again, because that is the theme of the show isn't about defeating the Fire Lord, it's about bringing back balance. And in so many other things, Aang tries to balance his role as the Avatar with his relationship to people. He tries to balance the relationship of his friends together. He tries to bring, the role of the Avatar is to bring people together. He's the bridge between the spirit world and the real world. And it is all about bringing people together. And yes, Katara, very important. She influenced him a little bit, and Toph taught him to change his point of view, again, a little bit. But I think even there, it wouldn't have brought peace unless there was somebody who was taking over the Fire Nation who would bring that peace and that harmony. And I also, if you look at the influence that all the characters have had on Aang, Zuko has had more influence, because he was the one, because Toph to a certain degree does challenge Aang, but her challenging him kind of ends after he becomes good at earthbending. She doesn't keep challenging him to be a better person. She pushes him to be a better earthbender, but she never challenges his position. Katara kind of always lets him do what he wants to do and is a very, enabling person. And
I've
I
never heard
guess
her described that way before.
yeah, but I mean, and yes, it does kind of fit more the archetype of the Lancer, the idea that, Zuko is the one who is making Aang think about his point of view and challenging it. But again, the reason that Zuko is challenging his point of view is because he wants the conclusion of the arc to be where it was. He has now given up on it. Like he had all but given up on his claim to the throne. He wasn't defeating his sister or fighting his father because he wanted to take over the Fire Kingdom and to be able to, be Fire Lord. He was doing it because it was the right thing to do to bring balance. And even Katara with her very good motivation still isn't risking everything in order to bring about peace. And I think that's also the other thing is that Zuko and Aang literally risk everything in order to have balance. And it's something that's lacking from the other characters.
I don't know. To me, Aang doesn't feel as much like a character. He's more like a plot device. It's like he is there for this adventure to happen. And again, maybe it's because he has a mostly flat character arc that he doesn't change all that much, that he doesn't seem I seem to care more about Sokka's journey as a character or Zuko's than I do about Aang's. So I'm happy.
Are you pushing to say that it is in fact just Zuko, not Aang at all?
Well, so if we go back to what that guy on YouTube, and I wish I remembered his name, but I don't, said a main character is the point of view. You're right. The point of view shifts a lot in Avatar, so it's hard to say that it's always Katara or Sokka or Aang. So if we kind of like break out of that a little bit and think about like who's the hero of the story or who's the protagonist, I think there's a way you could read the show and like look as Zuko as the protagonist, because he has a mission and he moves the plot forward. It's kind of like the opposite, right? Because it's like his initial mission is like, I gotta capture the Avatar, I gotta restore my honor. Like he has a very clear mission that is seemingly in contrast to Aang. So I think there's a reading in the story where, and I'm sure there's people who've done this because there are a lot of YouTube videos about Zuko. I'm sure you could say like he's the protagonist and he's the main character, or that maybe if we just break down
the hero.
Yeah, you could say maybe the best thing to say is he's the hero of the story, and we'll still call Aang the protagonist because his breaking out of the ice and his like blah 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 mission to restore balance and whatever, that is what generally moves the plot forward.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and again, it does depend on kind of the definition. When I was approaching this, I was approaching it to from the point of view of Aang and Zuko kind of both being protagonists, not in the sense of people pushing the plot forward, but the people whose objective, whose goal is the most important or is what drives the story. And in that case, I think that's accurate because, and again, there are more episodes in which obviously the first one is Aang's quest, but I think that Zuko's quest, and this is particularly true in a few episodes where Zuko is the main character fully, his quest is given more screen time, but also more importance, and is given more narrative weight than anybody else's other than Aang, because even yes, Katara and more so Sokka do have character moments that move the plot forward within certain episodes, but ultimately it's mostly episodic. Whereas, that's not to say they don't have a character growth throughout, but Aang's goal and Zuko's growth are the two main pillars of the show.
I guess I want to make a case for Sokka as the main character because not only does he have the most progression Well, actually, I don't know. Maybe you could argue Zuko has more progression than him, but he is like the everyman in this world. Everyone around him are these super talented people with powers, and he's just kind of an ordinary person
with a
and,
boomerang.
with a boomerang and then later a sword. But you
Yeah.
see this kind of world where all these people have superpowers. I know they're not really superpowers, but that's what I'm deciding to call them. You see the world through his perspective, even in the episodes where he's like, with these other characters. I feel like his kind of vantage point, at least for me, was one of the more interesting ones. And to get his insights on situations and to see his character evolve and his journey, like, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but at least put him on the ballot.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think by the end of this episode, we'll just have to agree that everybody might be the main character except Aang. I mean, not quite, but like,
I mean,
but
Aang, I
I don't
don't think
know.
there's an argument. We can't say that Aang is not the
No,
protagonist. Like,
I know.
he is literally the avatar.
But I mean, like,
But I don't think he's the hero of the story. Like, based on what that
no,
guy
I
wrote
don't
as a
think so either.
definition.
I think that by most definitions, Zuko is still the hero of the story. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, is just like, because I'm not saying that Zuko doesn't get enough recognition. Clearly he does. And so does Sokka. So, but I do think that there's a case to be made to say that out of all the characters, the two most important and the two without whom the story could not reach its proper conclusion are Zuko and Aang. Like, and also, and like, yes, I guess that you could not have Zuko and have the whole story be about Aang trying to restore the balance, but the show would be wildly different. Whereas if you had gotten a different waterbending master, if you had, like, there's a lot of characters. Even Toph could have been changed for one, like another one of the earthbending teachers, or like, yeah, you'd be missing one of the greatest characters in the show. But as far as direct influence and thematic weight that she brings, like, you could have just had Boomy be Aang's master. It would have broken the whole, band of kids traveling together. But I mean, look, I still would have watched Avatar: The Last Airbender if Boomy was traveling with the rest of Team Avatar. Like, how great would that have been? But ultimately, yeah, I think that it's just Zuko. And I think the other thing that made me say this and made me think this was that rewatching, I was like, man, Zuko's getting a lot of screen time. Like, I knew instinctually that he was important and that he does move a lot, but like, he actually is on screen a lot, and you see a lot of his development very directly. And I think more so than most other people, like, we talked about Sokka, he's got great character development, but it happens in kind of like, it happens more in little flashes and chunks rather than entire episodes dedicated to him. Because even the episodes in which he has a bigger role, other than when the episode in which he makes his sword, kind of don't really have so much, aren't dedicated fully to him.
Well,
And to
there's the
make
breaking out of
decisions.
the prison. That's pretty Sokka's focused.
Yes and no, because it doesn't actually. The breaking out of prison is Sokka focused, but it doesn't change that much to his character. Like, you don't see him grow that much in it. It's a good benchmark for his father to see the growth he has had, but within the episode, he's still pretty much exactly the same person at the beginning and at the end of Boiling Rock. In fact, I would argue that Zuko and Mai have more character development into those two episodes than Sokka does.
Yeah, okay. I'll concede. I'll concede that point. I'm just trying to imagine what would the show be like if Zuko wasn't in it. And you're right. I feel like a lot of the depth and the nuance, because Zuko's role, in a certain sense, it helps the audience understand that the Fire Nation is not just this giant evil galactic empire. That there are people who have dimension, and there's like it's an attempt to try and like show that not everyone who ascribes to a certain way of life should be responsible or should be seen as like just nothing but their, I guess, cultural identity.
Yeah, but I also think that, and I think that, again, this is what I'm kind of trying to poorly convey, is that that was very intentional. Like that, it wasn't just like, because sometimes TV shows run, and as they're running, they realize, hey, this character is popular, we're going to put him in more, right? But Zuko from the beginning they kept cutting back to him. And I think it's important to realize, like, the showrunners were doing this when he was still the whiny, annoying brat nobody liked, because I think people get this thing where they watch Avatar and they're like, yeah, Zuko was always a great character. No, he was, like, in the first 2 episodes, Zuko was not lovable. Like, he was tragic and kind of understandable, but no, he was just a whiny teenager, right? It took the entire series to get him to that point, and that initial state was essential to do that. But you can't discount the fact that they were giving him a lot of growth and starting to plant the seeds of who he would become and how important he would become, even when he wasn't popular.
I don't know. To me, in some respect, he's just the stereotypical shonen rival character who, again, starts out as an antagonist. And you're right, the kind of, I guess, the super stereotype, as you mentioned, like fairy tales, like once they beat them up, all of a sudden it's like, wow, like you're stronger than I am. I'm going to be your friend now. I've learned the error of my ways. But I don't know. I feel like there's lots of examples. Again, I think Vegeta is probably the best example of this, where it is a slow, gradual transition to being more of a hero. And I feel like Zuko is just sort of kind of following in that same trajectory, like that same pathing, if you will.
Yeah, and again, I think the main difference here, again, is the intention behind it. I think that, like, the intention behind it in shonen trope generally is to have a lancer, and is to have somebody who will eventually challenge the main character. But I think that, like, I agree with you, there is something of that, but I just feel like they put more effort into Zuko than they had to, if that's all he was going to end up becoming. And, like, again, even Vegeta, like, his character arc until after Namek still doesn't have any bearing of goodness. Like, it's at the end of Namek that there's the first moment where you start realizing, oh no, he could maybe eventually join the team. Whereas Zuko is from moment 1, well, not moment 1, but from like the second or third episode, when Iroh tells his backstory to the crew, and you're like, oh, okay, that is really serious.
It's more than just being a sympathetic villain, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's really deep-seated problems with his family, and I think, yeah, a lot of that is on Iroh at the beginning, but that doesn't mean that it negates kind of the importance that's put on Zuko and how he's going to develop.
But you mentioned General Iroh. I'm like, Zuko's character arc would be nothing without Iroh. Like, without Iroh, Zuko's character development is nothing. So does that mean if Zuko is so important to the story, does that mean Iroh's even, like, just as important?
So I think Iroh is definitely as important for the story to progress as it did, because he does also meet Aang later on and help him with some other things. But again, it's not. He isn't the central focus of that change,
right?
And also I think this episode should be called Beefporkribs Hot Takes on Avatar: The Last Airbender. People don't realize that Iroh has a character arc, because he's clearly way more chill than his brother, in the first episode, but he's still fighting for the Fire Nation, mostly for his nephew and mostly to be there. But it's only really at the end of book 1, it's in book 2. It's only really in book 2 that he starts taking specific actions against the Fire Nation. he starts being like, no, what they're doing is wrong and I will oppose it. Because in the first season, he's still pretty much just going along with it. And it's only later that he starts to really put himself out there and counter what's happening, which, culminates with him retaking the city that he was supposed to take as a Fire Nation soldier from the Fire Nation.
Side note, it's hilarious that they expect me to believe that Mako and Mark Hamill could be brothers.
I mean, yeah. But, and yet, the fact that Azula and Zuko are the way they are makes it more believable. I mean, Mako was a great villain in Samurai Jack.
That's right.
Aku!
So you're saying that Iroh doesn't have a flat character arc either, that he begins, because the three types of character arcs are positive, negative, and flat. A positive character arc begins with a character believing a lie about themselves or about who they are, and the story is about them overcoming that lie. A negative character arc is the opposite, where basically a person sort of descends into evil because they believe a lie about themselves. Azula would be a good example of that.
Yeah.
And then the flat character arc believes the truth of who they are at the beginning, and it's just never, like I said, it's about the world reacting to them rather than the character reacting to the world. So it sounds like you're saying Iroh does have a positive character arc.
Oh yeah, I believe so, definitely. But once again, it doesn't necessarily push him, I think, to protagonist or hero status. Like I think, like, by the definition of what a hero is, he is a hero by the definition we talked about, but he is not the hero of the story. Because it still wasn't narratively focused on him as much. And I think that's also kind of like you're talking about other characters that are important. I think you're right. A lot of characters, and like there are very few characters who are expendable in that show, which is quite extraordinary given how many characters there are.
Cabbage Man, he does need to be there.
No, but he should not be left out. It's one of the main problems with any versions of it that don't have it. But no, but I think again, if you're looking at it from narratively and who the focus of the story is on, I feel that, and that was the other thing that I've talked about it here and there, but like that struck me as like they spent a lot of time on Zuko and they spent a lot of time on Aang, and like there almost isn't an episode in the first book where there isn't like a moment where you see Zuko and see him like turmoiling with his inner thoughts or something like that, and there's no other character who gets that treatment other than Aang.
So I think I will ultimately disagree with you, Beeper. I don't think Aang and Zuko are both the main characters of this series. I think if we look at like what this guy says a main character is, no one in the show really fits that criteria because the point of view changes so often. I will say, I think Aang is the protagonist, and I think that Zuko is the hero.
Yeah, I can accept that conclusion. I don't entirely agree because I still think that it has to do with who is being focused on and what's happening, and both of them need to be there. But I see what you're saying as well.
And maybe this is a good way to kind of contrast the series to The Legend of Korra, because I keep hearing, I've only seen the first like 4 episodes. I keep hearing the show's not as good. Is it because it doesn't have, I mean, is the premise of the show the same about the Avatar bringing balance?
Yeah, that's the thing that is strange about Korra, and I haven't seen the last 2 seasons, and apparently that kind of gets a little bit better because things like that are being explored. But like, I think so, but I think in Korra, the problem is that they have a different imbalance each book, instead of structuring everything around one conflict. And like, that's not the only problem. There's a lot of problems with Korra, but I think that is one of the reasons it doesn't hit at the same level as Avatar: The Last Airbender is that it lacks kind of the one central theme and other characters bringing it in. Because once again, each antagonist does have a character arc that brings in a different aspect. And I think that Korra does a good job at trying to explore the nuances of the world without necessarily giving one full adventure to like one full story. I think that's one of the big things. Korra is 4 different stories. Avatar: The Last Airbender is 1.
And this is probably a good time as any to mention. We've mentioned on the show before, but Avatar Studios is now a thing. They're making new content for Paramount Plus. So as we like think about them kind of continuing the world of Avatar: The Last Airbender, would we want to see like a series completely told from one person's point of view as the main character? Would we want someone else other than Aang to be the protagonist? And like, is there a different character that we'd like to see as the hero of the story?
I mean, I think that no, I think that Avatar: The Last Airbender is quite unique in what it did, and that you would have to do an entirely new, entirely original story in order to make it work. Maybe they can do that in the history, and there'd be something. And I would like for it to be a bit more of a unified story with that main theme in it. But I think that by the very nature of what it is, it might be better for it to just do what Korra did, but in smaller bites and not with one entirely new main character, or like don't try to make it as epic. And I think that's the other thing is that like not every avatar had one major thing they had to overcome and the rest of their lives was like was different, or that that was worthy of chronicling, right? And I think that's kind of the problem with trying to make a sequel that goes around the very next Avatar, and you're like, well, there's more trouble happening. It kind of undercuts the massive amount of works that Aang put in to keep the world at peace.
Well, I'll make a pitch. I would love to see a show where Sokka and Suki are the protagonists, where they're kind of the ones driving the story forward, because I understand their characters aren't in Korra. I think they died off before.
Yeah, I mean, if I could have one wish, it would be that to know what happened to Sokka between Avatar: The Last Airbender and Korra.
So
that was my biggest disappointment with Korra. Is like, oh, Sokka's not there. Well, okay.
So there you go. Hopefully you've enjoyed this conversation. If you haven't seen Avatar: The Last Airbender yet, and maybe you're like me, maybe you like listening to people talk about Avatar: The Last Airbender without actually watching it, that's okay. I took my time. I don't regret waiting, but I will recommend you watch it. So take that with a grain of salt. The series is currently available on Netflix, and if you live in the US, I believe it's on Paramount Plus. And they are making more content for this universe. In fact, there's even a podcast now where the voice actors for Zuko and Korra kind of go back and listen to or watch old episodes of Avatar and then talk about it. So they're really putting out more and more content set in this universe or related to this universe. So perfect time to get into it.
Yeah. Sorry, you just reminded me there's a podcast that Zach Braff and Donald Faison do where they watch old episodes of Scrubs, and it's amazing.
There's also one where like a couple cast from The Office, I think it's called Office Ladies, they go back and watch old episodes of The Office.
I had not heard of that. That sounds entertaining, though.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of actors have gotten into the podcasting game during the pandemic.
Especially during the pandemic.
So now it's time to go inside the bat jar and look at our mail. And by that I mean we won't, because there isn't any.
If you want to reach the show, you can send us an email at
batjarpodcast@gmail.com.
Or you can tweet us at
The Bat Cookie Jar.
You can find the Bat Jar Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, including YouTube, because we got a channel. Share our posts on Facebook, write reviews, give our shows a rating. This will help all people join us inside the Bat Jar, and we appreciate it dearly.
All right. We've got one more week before Black Widow comes out.
Oh, right. That's a thing.
And I
Is
just
it coming out
realized
just on Disney Plus, or will it be out in theaters if they're open?
it is a dual release. So it'll be open in theaters, mostly in the United States. At least here in Ontario, movie theaters won't be open until we hit step 3. And we're just going to step 2 on this coming Wednesday.
But I think in Alberta, we're going to be good by the time it comes out. So I might. Plus, Mjolnir loves watching MCU movies in the theater, so I think I'll try.
I guess it'll be the last one you guys can go watch in theaters before you have a baby.
Ha! Yep.
All right, here we go. All right, what do we got here? Oh, Super Smash Brothers.
Is that also me?
Probably.
I'm not sure, though. It is a popular game.
I definitely wouldn't have put this in here if it
Pixel Patch might have.
He might have. Who knows? But okay, I guess we're going to be talking about the Super Smash Brothers franchise next week. I think you hold the opinion that the original is still the best. Is that right?
No, I've become more objective in my old age. The first one, the original, is still my favorite, and the only one I can play with any degree of proficiency.
All right, well, let's not
get
spoil the whole episode.
Yeah.
Come back to the Batshar podcast next week when we talk about Super Smash Brothers. And until that time, I'm Average Joe.
And I'm Beefporkribs.
Catch you on the flip side.
A new record!